Good afternoon. Welcome back to the videos here. It's been a little while. I hope you're all staying safe and healthy now that some of our pandemic self-isolation restrictions are just lightening up a little. And happy Mother's Day to all the mothers this coming Sunday. Enjoy your Mother's Day and all the beautiful pampering as much as is possible at this time. Continue to stay safe and healthy. In this video, what I really wanted to expand on a little more is the concept I introduced in the very first video when I spoke about metacognitive skills of the detached observer. And I'd like to clarify what the detached observer is and what the detached observer is not. The detached observer is not cold or callous or uninterested in the things that we're observing or looking at. The detached observer is in fact full of warmth and vibrant energy and balanced mental and emotional energy, which means we feel a sense of harmony. So imagine it like an infinity symbol of harmony and balance, where the various energies that move through us and out of us are always in some kind of harmony, even if there's some sort of distress. And in light of the last couple of months where we've all had to socially adjust to self-isolation and social distancing and fears that may be happening around the COVID-19 virus, what that means for us personally in our health and the health of those around us, it's actually been a time we've been practicing a lot of this detached observer, figuring out information that's been coming in, how we process it, where we stand on it, what we do to keep ourselves safe and healthy, and in terms of our social and community responsibility, what we also do and don't do. So the detached observer is very much engaged and invested, but the important differentiation of being engaged and invested with attachment and being invested as a detached observer is that there's this space to be able to observe and evaluate harmoniously. Now, what is the purpose of this detached observer as we integrate and synthesize the skills of metacognitive skills, inner strength, centeredness, and the various applications I've shared as examples, and you will have your own, I'm sure. What is the purpose of it all coming together? Because when we synthesize it, 2 + 2 = 100, and the detached observer becomes a very powerful weapon, for want of a better word, a very powerful gift, a very powerful strength that we can apply at any time, and most importantly during distressing, stressful, difficult situations, which is when we need it the most. It comes easy when we don't have those circumstances. We can observe and balance and harmoniously get our mental and emotional energy happening when we don't have distresses going on. So the purpose of it is really developing ego resilience. Sounds like a fancy dancy kind of word, but let me explain that. The ego, we all have it. You know, the ego is an important partner and counterpart to our soul self, our energetic soul self in the 5th dimension, and our ego, which plays between the 3rd and 4th dimension, our physicality being the 3rd dimension, and our thoughts and feelings being within the 4th dimension, and they all interweave very importantly. We often hear a lot about trying to suppress the ego or getting over ourselves in terms of the ego, and that's not helpful. It's just frankly not helpful. What we need to do is learn how to work with the ego, and more importantly, create an ego resilient ego, which means it has some buffer zone, which means when we're distressed or triggered or challenged by something in our environment, perceived or real, there is buffer zone for the ego to take a breath and step into the detached observer so that there aren't impulsive reactions. Instead, there's that space to help create more considered responses, which means sometimes holding back from a reaction, or depending on the situation, being able to respond with far more considered response and as a harmonious observer, because we've been able to integrate those 3 skills more quickly with practice, and we can respond instead of react. We can give a more considered action rather than an impulsive reaction. And if we think about some of the reactions we've seen within Australia and internationally, for example, people being asked to wear masks. It's a choice, but in certain parts of the world, people have really reacted quite aggressively to the suggestion of wearing a mask, not only for their own safety, but if not for themselves, for the people around them. Now, that's a choice that people can choose, of course. It's not mandated. I don't think that's appropriate. But to have such a reactive, aggressive response is the kind of thing that shows a lack of ego resilience. It hasn't been developed, it hasn't been practiced. So using that example, it's someone being able to go, okay, I don't feel comfortable wearing a mask, or I do feel comfortable wearing a mask. These are my reasons why, and this is when I'll do it and when I won't, or how I'll help mitigate the situation, given this is a social responsibility we're all in and having to consider. So I hope that makes sense. So if you consider your soul level self and your ego resiliency as a double helix, like our DNA, they interweave with each other. So if you imagine that double helix, one of those helix strands is our soul level strengths. It's an infusion of energy that helps to create the buffer for the ego, which is the other helix strand. And when we allow ourselves to apply the three skills, metacognition, inner strength, and centeredness, we're helping exercise the ego resilience. So we're reducing ego rigidity and increasing ego resilience, which means there's a buffer zone. It's like a bouncy house. You don't have to feel so affronted or attacked or reactive even when something hits your hot buttons. So by helping that ego strand develop that resilience, it actually becomes a lot more receptive to your soul level strengths. It becomes a lot more responsive to what your more congruent wellspring of energy helps you with, the strengths, the gifts, the leadership skills that are actually yours to shine in, distinct, unique leadership strengths, which is what we're getting to with the Akashic record readings when we dig through the ego rigidity and the blocks that are stopping that energy, and we open it up more so that it gives a window, if not a doorway, if not a gateway, to allow more of the soul level strengths to filter in and weave into that double helix. So they're a partnership. So I hope that clarifies a bit of what the detached observer has as a purpose. The detached observer is about us developing a very helping us develop a strengthened double helix of our soul and ego interweaving with each other, integrating and synthesizing their information so that 2 + 2 = 100 whenever we're challenged somehow. So the detached observer isn't cold, it isn't callous, it isn't uninterested. The detached observer is actually quite invested. There's a lot of warmth and responsive energy there, but it becomes much more refined, it becomes much more focused, laser sharp, so that we actually respond in congruence and attunement with what our soul level strengths are. And by doing that, we don't waste our energy, we don't waste our resources, whether they be internal resources or external physical resources, and we don't waste our time, which means when we don't waste it, we have it more in our energy bank, which is awesome, and that's what we do. So the Akashic records are there primarily, particularly in how we work on it as a partnership, if you were to have an Akashic record reading, is to look at your distinct leadership, and that's how we help get you to your self-leadership. Because once you keep strengthening and practicing your detached observer, you can much more warmly and responsively have a look at how your blocks are limiting access to the soul level strengths in the double helix. And in the process, your ego resilience develops. It just becomes your ally instead of something that you feel you need to resist or work against. Helps you chuckle at yourself, that all important laughter, but it also helps you see where the line of going, okay, I really need to take this part seriously because I'm sabotaging myself, or I'm holding myself back, or I'm repeating the same pattern all the time, and while I think I'm changing it, I'm actually not, because I'm scared or I'm fearing something. And so we can work through that ego rigidity, that strand that's keeping itself a little tight and stuck, and give it a bit more ego resilience so that it can infuse and work harmoniously with the soul level strand. And there, simultaneously, your detached observer keeps strengthening, keeps developing, and the cycle and the spiral continues. It just keeps evolving and deepening, so that you've always got this beautiful process where you step into your own distinct leadership strengths more and more easily, and you find just so many immense ways to apply it in ways that bring you joy and reward. If you have any questions or comments, please, as usual, feel free to put them in the comments below or send me a DM and I'll be happy to answer your question there or in a video if appropriate, and we can continue this chat and discussion. Thank you so much. Have an awesome evening and a fantastic weekend. Happy Mother's Day. See you later.